that my data is Zoom is not my friend. That's not true. They're not my friend right now in relationship to data because they're like, come on here and clear up your data.
Yeah.
You save things on it too much. It's like, okay, your limit is almost up.
Right. Yeah.
Pay more or get your stuff.
Exactly. They got to get their coin. So
Yeah. Okay, so welcome to my faux environment for art, life, and social practice. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So where is your studio? Come to think of it.
Pyramid Atlantic in Highsville.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I think I've asked you that before. So what's behind you? Is that Malik?
That is Malik. Let me see if I can move. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
A piece of Malik.
I
Yeah.
like I like that. Reminds me of a Titus Kapoor piece.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, like the
It's
negative
cut
space is
out.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesante. Okay. And what's to the other side of you?
Two more recent works I've been working on. They're kind of prototypes for future pieces. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out how I want to combine drawing and quilting together.
Oh, so
So
the
this was like working with logistics of trying to see how it's going to work. So
so the larger material beyond the image of the figure is a quilt.
yes, they're
Ah,
two small quilts.
material. Oh, that's interesting. You make me want to like take the camera with you. Go so you see details and stuff. But if you don't want to share, I get it. But nice. Okay. So, Michael, I don't know that I've realized that you were actually dealing with fabric. Because I remember when you first joined MFA, and I think I told you this. When you
Mhm.
first joined MFA, I was like, yes. Okay. So another fiber artist. Yeah, oh,
Uh-huh.
and then I remember getting in close and I'm like, oh, it's not that I was upset with your work or anything. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying it was just just a slight disappointment because I realized at that point, I was like, I was looking at something that appeared to be fabric, but it was not. But
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see that you are moving into fabric. And so I want to ask you when that happened, but I want to start before.
Yeah. Okay.
So tell me what what led you to go to pen? And I'm assuming pen was your first medium. Is
Mhm.
that the case?
No.
No.
I thought I was a quote unquote painter.
Shut
Like
up. So you painted
yeah. And
first?
so yeah, in undergrad and grad school, like painting was like my main medium. And then I remember in 2017, during the snowpocalypse, when people were stuck on 295 for like 10 hours, like that
Yeah,
time, if you remember that time, I
yeah.
remember being stuck at home. And I just picked up like pen and paper and I just kind of went from there and it wasn't like a impulse. It was more about with painting. I was feeling kind of unhappy with the things I was making. Like I didn't really feel like I was making what I wanted to make with painting. I feel like I was trying to compare my paintings to other painters instead of making work for myself. And so
Oh,
when I started drawing and pick up the pen, I felt it was way more freeing. I felt like I wasn't trying to live up to some type of canon of art history or uh fit into some narrative like I was with painting compared to drawing. It was like pen and paper. You don't need any extra technology or materials or whatever. Just go. And I kind of just been doing it ever since.
that is deep. Oh my goodness. So this makes me wanna, for some reason, the way that I do these conversations is like I like to like have a timeline to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, your technique reminds me of my not your technique. Well, yeah, somewhat your technique reminds me of my brother. And my brother, I know that my brother does he does paper mosaic, right? Which is really small, tearing pieces of paper, and then he builds up the image,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know just from seeing him throughout the years that he does it, it's like it's part of his self-care to some degree, part of how he
Mm-hmm.
processes his environment and things that. And so to me, especially after I saw a couple of videos where you were actually drawing and I saw how what is the word? I want to say monotonous, or not monotonous, but just how continuous and ongoing, how much
It's monotonous.
it is, and how
Yeah.
much concentration you have to put into it. So I wondered, I was like, oh, I wondered if I thought that you had come to that particular technique early, and it had so anyways, how did you, once you found the technique, is it meditative for you? Is it
It has to be. It
mm,
has to be, because you're doing like just this over and over and over again. And if you can't get into that, like, it's not for you. Like, don't try to do it, because you'll go crazy. You'll go
yeah,
insane. Like, it has to be something you need to enjoy doing.
yeah,
Um, because what it also helps do is help me focus on, like, if your mind running a million different places at all times, like, this is an opportunity to kind of help focus on like a goal and a task. And like in one of the videos I made for, something in the past, I talked about drawing as an analogy to like climbing a mountain. Whereas if I'm making a larger drawing, it's this huge white piece of paper that's there, and I
mm,
have this small little pen, and I know I can't do that drawing all in one day.
mm-hmm,
And so if I'm climbing that mountain, I got to take it step by step. And I'm going to set this small goal for myself. Like, okay, today I'm going to reach this peak. I'm going to reach this part here. Then I come back the next day, I'm going to reach this peak. So I'm like climbing this mountain until I get to the top when it's finally done.
mm-hmm.
But it's setting those small goals helps you kind of focus with it. But then once you finish, you got to go down the mountain. And it's like this, there's always this weird feeling when I finish a piece. It's not relief. It's more like, what do I do now? Uh,
Really?
yeah, and so it's now, it's like I got to climb that mountain again. So it's all
Yes,
it's
okay, I
keep
do know
going up
that
and
feeling.
down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah, I do know that feeling. Um, hmm. So tell me, what is the difference in between, were you still tackling the same subject matter when you were painting?
similarly, like so I have a background in quilt making.
Yeah.
And when I say a background, it's not formally trained, but like my mother made quilts, my grandmother made quilts.
Grandmother, right.
Yeah, and so like, and my mother, well, specifically my grandmother, they would make quilts. She would make quilts for me and my sister, and give them to us as we were growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think too much of them, growing up. It wasn't until I came to Maryland. I'm originally from Mississippi. It wasn't until I came to Maryland and moved away from home is when I started to develop more of an appreciation for them and
Mm,
start to go back into the histories for them as well. And that's also why I chose pen, because the pen reminded me of like embroidery or thread. And so the connection with the pen with textiles was something I was always kind of thinking about, whether the work looked like the quilt or is more of like abstract components of quilt making. Like quilts has always kind of been like the basis of a lot of things that I've done for the past 10 or so years, probably more than that.
So when it comes to the quilt making, like, who taught your grandmother? Is it
That's
is
a good
has it been,
question.
has it
That's
been
a,
in your lineage in your family for beyond your grandmother?
to be honest, I don't know.
Oh, well, I
So
just gave
don't
you
know the
just
answer
a
to
job. I just gave you a task.
that.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I think you should. It's worth like further investigation, right?
Yeah, it is. It's because like when I go and visit her, because she can't do as much now.
Yeah.
She has arthritis in her hands and things, so she always like to hand stitch, but she still does it anyway, regardless of what the doctors say.
Wait a minute, she
Uh,
hand stitches?
yes,
Wow.
she hand stitch. She tried to do a little bit more machine stitch, like my mother. Like she'll do some tops, and my mother will like quilt it for her sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, she does a lot of hand stitching. She just made some small what's the thing it's called in the kitchen with the pot? You trying to pick up a pot, you put
Oh,
the
pot holder.
thank you. My mind was going blank, but she just made a few of those for me. When I went to see her, and she was like, "I'm sorry I couldn't get you any present or something like that for Christmas." I was like, "I don't want that. I want these. I want this
Yeah.
that what you made." So
Wow.
yeah, but it would be nice to. I need to go back and call her and ask her where did she learn it from.
Yeah, because I the way, because one of the questions I was going to ask you is like, who taught you about quilts? I mean, what did any of that come with, that knowledge come with your grandmother? Did the majority of it come through your own, once you decided that this was something that was valuable, once you realized, the value in
Mhm.
it, then did you gather up the information around the research about quilting?
Yeah, a lot of it happened in grad school. Um, when I was in grad school, and I would call my mother all the time, asking her about it. But then also reading certain things about like quilts, like during the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
and other traditions with quilts. Or there's a certain book, Hidden in Plain View, that I really kind of got into in terms of like the hidden meanings behind quilts in the Underground Railroad. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember like one specific instance around this time. I was like judging like a high school like art competition, and one of the other judges there, we were having a conversation about the myth or the truthfulness behind some of these things about quilts.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of some of the things I was researching and reading, they were trying to claim that none of it was true
Mm-hmm.
because there was no written evidence for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of started a little bit of debate, because like it wasn't any written evidence for it because going back to the Underground Railroad, we couldn't read or write then, and it was supposed to be hidden. Like you weren't supposed
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah.
It wasn't supposed to be public knowledge for in terms of all these signs and symbols within the quilts.
No.
And so like this debate in terms of how stories are kind of told orally and the validity that those things have over time and
Yeah.
how they get twisted and turned over time. And now how certain art historians are trying to combat like our histories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like gotten a little bit deeper in terms of over time when our story is told, whether it's through quilt making or it's through something else, how the pyramids were built, or like it's built by aliens or something like that, like not giving us credit for what we've our accomplishments. And so that's kind of been a driving force with a lot of things too.
Interesting. So, okay, when it comes to undergrad, so I'm sorry. Tell me about your schooling in relationship to your career. When
Yeah.
did you know that you wanted to be an artist? And did you? Did that come later on in your life?
Oh, so yeah. So I went to Mississippi State University and got
Yeah.
a BFA in painting. That was 2009. And then I went to UMD, University of Maryland, for grad school. Um, and the only reason why I went to grad school is because I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. It wasn't like I want to be an artist. It was like I need to figure out the next step. So I just go to grad school. They're offering a fellowship, so I'll just go. And then plus I was looking for a way to get out of Mississippi as well. So like I went to grad school for that, and it wasn't until throughout grad school I started to think about being an artist as a possibility. Even being in at grad school for art, it still wasn't a possibility until like a little bit middle or later on. Um, and then when I started teaching and things, they started to like open up possibilities for stability and things like that could support my practice as well. But it
Where
took me, yeah,
Go ahead, sorry. It took you
I
what?
say it took me a while to realize art could be a pathway for me.
Hmm. So where were you teaching at that point?
At UMD. So at University of Maryland, like being a first starting off as a teacher's assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and then teaching some classes while in grad school. And I was working at the David C. Driscoll Center as well, and I think that opened a lot of doors up for me. So that was my first year in grad school, because UMD is a 3-year program, which most other places only 2 years. But my first year at UMD, I was working at the David C. Driscoll Center, and like at that point, I didn't have a lot of um, I hadn't really looked into Black art much before then. It wasn't something that was exposed to me by other people. Um,
Really?
and then when I
There's
got there,
a
like
whole
was
undergraduate program.
right, and so like being in Mississippi, being at a PWI, um, yeah, so it wasn't something that I was that aware of. And so when I went to the David C.
Close
Driscoll
to.
Center, it like opened up like so much. And I remember at the time working there, I didn't like it. it was a lot of work and it was kind of strenuous, but like looking back on it, I was like, I appreciate that experience so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so thank you, Dorit Yaron, for what she did.
Yes. Wow. Did you were you able to meet and have a relationship with Driscoll?
I met him like once or twice.
Mm.
Um, so I really didn't get to talk to him much, but he remembered me. Like I remember going to the NGA for a talk he did a few years ago before, obviously before he passed. I think it was with Ellington Robinson. And I remember seeing him outside. He was like, "Hey, Mississippi," and I was like, "Oh,
Oh, nice.
yeah." So, but I went to his studio once while I was working there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I didn't have much interaction with him.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. So tell me, I know that you teach with National Gallery of Art. How did that come upon, and what is that like for you?
Yeah, so that was a great opportunity. One person, well, actually, last summer, before I did the virtual class, I did something with a cohort that they had over the summer of students they had, and I went and visited them to talk to them about a certain project they were working on, and just kind of critiquing their work and kind of helping them develop their own ideas. And then from that, another person at the NGA got hold of what I did there, and they reached out and looked at some of my drawings and things, and thinking about how I could share the techniques I've kind of developed over the years with pen and share those things with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with it being like a medium that you don't see as much in comparison to other media,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it was a great opportunity for me because I've never really been able to teach how to draw with pen, even like in my professional teaching career. Like it's always color pencil or charcoals or things like that. So pen is always it's always on like the back burner. And so like when
Yeah,
he reached out with
it's
this
not considered a
opportunity,
traditional media.
yeah,
Right.
when he reached out with the opportunity, I was like, yes, like I'm let's go. I want to do this because I feel like it's some ways there's a lot of other artists that work in pen.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like particular people that I know in my immediate circle, like I feel like I'm not the only one, but almost the only one, you know? So just looking for ways I could try to share like the ideas of working with pen and the growth and the potentiality that it has as well. So I was really excited to do it and to hopefully continue to do it as well.
And so who's the audience? Who are the students? Meaning not individually, but like
Yeah.
like who are their students? Are we talking and
So
we're talking in person and or online?
so I've done it virtually. That it may be a possibility to do some in person, which I would like to do, but it was all virtual. So it was a range of age groups
Mm-hmm.
from people that are in high school and college. I know there's even people that was like 14 years old in there, some really young kids in there, and there's also some more experienced learners in there as well. So people there in their later stages. So it's like a large group of people as we're talking about how to work with pen, how to layer color. And so it's beautiful to think about because it can affect such a large range group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't have to think about it as like this specialized thing that only certain learned people can do. Like you have to be, you don't need a lot of money to do it. Like you can be anywhere in the world to do it. And it's just the accessibility of it is what I appreciated most. And so being able to have a range of students that reflected that was great as well.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I keep on as I'm like processing what you're saying and then remembering what I wanted to like prep work, one of the things that I am so drawn to about, especially since I saw like the videos of you drawing, like can you explain how you went from what I would call like a continuous line drawing or line drawing in general to then building up layers and almost like lyrical drawing to some extent? How did that happen for you?
Well, what do you mean when you say lyrical? That was an interesting way to put it.
Because what I see like is a continuous loop that happens that you do, and then you do it in a different color, and or even your mark making, when it's like
Mm-hmm.
the how do I say that? Almost like the grid, and then you'll do one
Mm-hmm.
grid and then another grid and then another grid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so it's real to me, it's like building a language.
It
But
is.
how did you, and I hear, like, I hear some of the answer that I think you're going to give me, which is like connecting it to fabric and to sewing, right? In
Mm-hmm.
terms of the thread, but like taking that from paper to, I'm sorry, the idea from doing it from thread to paper to pen, that's not a like
Yeah.
one-to-one, translation to some extent. So I'm wondering, how did that,
Yeah.
you ever considered or thought about that?
Yeah, so it's because if you mentioned lyrical, like I've been kind of looking at what some other people who draw been as they talk about their work recently, and they talk
Yeah.
about this idea of call and response, which is harkens back to our own cultures as well.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes it's like the drawing is telling you something, you have to go with it.
Oh, that's
It's
absolutely.
not always it's not always like I'm gonna do this thing and it has to look like this. It's like
Hmm.
I start something, it's starting to tell me something, and I need to respond to it. um and and it is a connection with like fabrics and quilts, but it's also a connection to just color theory and thinking about like how I want to develop that color.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot about color itself more so than like the figures in the work or some of the abstract elements in the work. Like color is like a huge driving force for me. So
Okay, you froze on me. There you are.
oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're
Am I
going.
still here?
Yeah, yeah. I see you. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So um and then thinking about like the connection with quilt, because you said the word lyrical, and the connection with quilts, I think about its connection to like hip hop and music, whereas like sampling, whereas in quilts you're taking like a part of this shirt with a part of these jeans over here with a part of this old bed sheet over here and putting them all together to create this one new thing. When the history of our music with hip hop and other forms of music that we have, we've been doing the same thing for a long time as well. We will
Hmm.
take a sample from this song, flip it, and change it into something else. And so I kind of think about that in terms of color, and in terms of the pen, where I'm kind of like looking at other sources and kind of combining things and layering it and taking it to create something new out of it. So it all kind of becomes a cyclical nature for me, whether it's through music or it's through color. It's all kind of relates in my mind, no matter what the media may be.
Interesting. So, how old are you?
I'm 37, about to be 38.
37. All right. How did you get connected with MFA, More in Fine Arts?
So um I kind of knew Nate a little bit, Nate Lewis. I didn't know him well, but I always knew him and respected his work. This is like in when was this, like 2015, 2016, sometime around there.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I started going to some of the openings there. Um and some other curators like Jarvis, like knew Amy Jarvis Dubois, who's somebody I had been working with a little bit at the time, and he knew Amy. So I would go to openings, and he introduced me to Amy, and I would keep going. And then finally, I told Amy, I'm looking for some opportunities. Is there any opportunities that may be available? So just kind of put myself out there with it, and so over time, I kept working. And then, over time, she contacted me and wants to do a studio visit. Um, as I was like developing my work a little bit more. Um, and then it kind of went from there. So, but it happened over like a longer period of time. It wasn't like an instantaneous thing. I felt like I needed to build to it and get ready to be a part of it, as I was still developing what I wanted to do with pen in the first place.
Okay. Hmm. Um, so I want to know, when it comes to fabric, when it comes to quilting, did you teach yourself? And how was that? How did you nurture that through, I'm assuming through either grad school, undergraduate and graduate, because quilting is not from a European canon, which most of our institutions are still, even the HBCUs, they're still under the guise, to some extent, of a European art canon. So how were you able to nurture that throughout those institutions?
Yeah, so in grad school, that's when I really started digging into it
Got it.
more.
Yeah.
And there was a one of my peers there. His name was Mark. He knew how to sew, and I didn't at the time.
Mm,
And so he helped me with like learning how to sew and things like that. But it was also a lot of phone calls to my mother, like as well,
mm,
getting advice from her and trying to figure out how to do it. And then like in I think it was the Christmas of 2018, Christmas holidays of 2018 is when I made my first quilt. Like when I went home,
mhm,
and me and her, we made a quilt together. You know, from a lot of my old clothes. And like I had done like tops before, like making the quilt tops, but I
mhm.
hadn't done like the actual quilting process before.
Yeah.
And that was my first time doing it. And I didn't realize how hard it was.
I was gonna say how much work it is. Yeah.
It's so much work. God. Especially because I just have like a little standard singer, like a heavy duty singer with, it's not that the arm isn't that long. So I
Yeah.
have this big 60 by 80 quilt I'm trying to roll up, trying to feed through it. I'm trying to get to the middle of the quilt. Like it's taxing, it's laborious. Like
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much it was going to be.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. So I although I work on, because I work on quilts that have already been produced, you know,
Mhm.
and I it's funny because especially for how many people are actually working on sewing in that way now, like more so than before. I've often thought to myself, or recently I've thought to myself, Amber, you like literally I got two two sewing machines that are chilling. And I haven't
Mhm.
sewed since 2007, 2008. Like I have this series called Heal Thyself, and I did
Mhm.
it sewing, and we're talking like small pieces of fabric, like ridiculous amount of time that I took. But and I've thought to myself, okay, will you ever go back, to do that, to do another layer of sewing work? And I still don't have an answer because the patience that it
Mhm.
takes. And I think to myself, like all the works in the mediums that I've worked in, but still I'm questioning, do I have enough patience to go back and sew? Because
Yeah,
it's a lot of work. It is
it is.
a lot of work.
And
A
that's
lot.
what I appreciate about it, though, especially with my connection with pen. Like both of those things take patience. So, for example, like the pieces behind me here,
Yeah.
part of me even questions in terms of like myself positioning myself as an artist that's intervening into these fabrics. So, like these are made out of my old clothes.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, it wasn't enough to just cut up my clothes and make a quilt out of them. I feel like I needed to intervene into the fabric with another way. So I needed to bleach it. So like it has a lot of bleach spots in it. Some
Yeah.
of it is dyed. So I've been dyeing fabric some too before I can even like put it in the quilt. So like, because I feel like I was questioning my ability to, well, just questioning my ability to use quilts as a quote unquote fine art piece compared to being craft, like the whole, debate fine art versus craft. And so like the patience, I have to have like even more patience as I'm kind of thinking about design or what I want to do with the quilt. Because I need to sit and wait for the bleach to like sit and affect it. I need to dye it, which is a whole thing I'm kind of learning about and going through. And it's like all these steps I'm kind of going through to make sure I'm putting my mark or my stamp on the
Mm,
piece on.
yeah.
So it's just not like a standard quilt there.
Okay, so you can't talk all about the work like that. Is right behind you and not
Yeah.
pick up the yes, thank you. I'm just saying. I was gonna let it go the first time. In fact, I let it go the first
Let's do
time.
this. I'm gonna pick it up here. Uh, so this is one of these here. Uh, the light isn't catching it as well, but it's a full front and back quilt that's been quilting and things. The
Yeah.
back was just like a random piece, but it's the stitching is kind of going through there. This was an old Nike t-shirt
Yeah.
here. Um, and this was just part of the same shirt that was dyed just to be just a slightly different color. and this was a plaid blue and black. It was a plaid blue and black shirt that's here at the bottom that was bleached, that I bleached
Yeah.
it. And then there's a little bit of hand embroidery in here too. This part here is embroidered for the bottom of the earring.
Nice. So
That's all been hand embroidered.
how will you adhere or sew or attach the rest of the image to it? Because I can see when you move it that the
Yeah.
paperwork is not completely
Yeah,
attached.
so it is sewn to it. You can
Oh,
see
the top
the
is.
yeah.
Oh,
So it's sewn down most places. The only place it's not sewn
is the
is right here
bottom. Right.
because
Okay.
I didn't want to see the thread going through this lighter part.
Right.
So I
Okay.
just stopped it to be only in the blue parts. So it's
Oh.
to only be in the blue parts there and not in that lighter part that's there.
So, Michael, do you know, what's her name? Yeah. Oh God, what is her name? Her name is Julie something.
What is this in reference to?
Well, they're artists. They're fabric artists. Like, do you know Francine Haskins?
I do not. I don't think so.
So I gotta hook you up with, I can't remember what Julie's name is, but Julie is also a fabric artist. She's a painter. And these are people that I know through Black Artists of DC.
Mm-hmm.
And your work, especially as you continue to venture down, the with dealing with fabric, your subject matter, because a lot of times you are dealing with the Black figure, and hair and skin and
Mm-hmm.
texture. And I want to connect you with Julie and Francine. I think, and oh, James Brown. Have you heard of James Brown?
Okay. Well, not the James Brown I'm thinking of, but
Yeah, no, not that James Brown. But James Brown, he also works with felt. He does
mm-hmm.
phenomenal things with felt. And I don't have any in this room, but I also have Francine does dolls. And when you hear the word, me say dolls, you think, oh, that might not be the equivalent of fine art, but her shit is the equivalent of fine fucking art. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
it's oh, it's so divine. Her dolls. In fact, her dolls are being sewn at the National Museum. What is it? I call it the Blacksonian.
Oh, yes. And I
Yes,
always forget the acronym, but yes.
yes, me too.
NMAAHC or something like that.
Yes. But I think that you would have some really good conversations about materiality and just the way that, especially Francine and James. Anyway, so if you're open to it, I'd like to
Oh, most definitely.
Julie Thompson, that's her last name.
Okay.
Yeah. And so and even, if you ever have time on a Sunday to go to a Black Artists of DC meeting, because they have a phenomenal, like just a range of people. And a lot of them are like you say, the more experienced, the elder set of people that are just doing it when it comes to pushing the boundaries of what traditional European, fine art is. Phenomenal work. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I got
Yeah. No, that
but
sounds good to me.
okay, good. I'm gonna enjoy connecting you guys. And also Daniel Brooking, he does, I think it's called Chibori. It's a dyeing technique, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's a Japanese technique.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
what he does. Yeah. Anyway, so that's gonna be fun connecting you.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then I was listening to like a couple of interviews that you did and videos, and one of the things that I heard you say was that you like to deal with figuration in relationship to your subject matter that you
Mm-hmm.
focus on. Um, and you said that in every person, there's a little bit of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, but you don't like focusing on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I thought to myself, okay, like how does that manifest? How do those things relate? Like in every person, there's a little bit of you, but you don't like to focus on it, and you don't like to draw yourself. And I thought there's
Mm-hmm.
something there. Like what is that about?
Yeah. It's like I like to focus more on our shared experiences. And I think the figure is just a conduit for me to talk about shared experiences
Mm,
rather than it being a portrait of an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so like for a long time, like if you talk about like the skin and the hair and things, I focus a lot on that. Like even with like, you know, portraits with you're only just seeing the back of their head, like you don't see their face at all. To
Mm-hmm.
talk about us as a group instead of talking about here's a portrait of Malik, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
this piece is all about Malik. Like I like to think about our shared experiences and how my experiences that I may go through are common. As we think about some of the things that we go through sometimes, it's like sometimes we feel like we're the only person on earth that's going through this. Um,
We in our
but like we
feelings.
realize, what's that?
So when we're in our feelings.
Exactly. Yeah. But
Yeah.
we get to realize like we're a lot of other people are going through these things as well.
Yeah.
So like for example, like the two works behind me, like this portrait of Malik and then the two quilts there, I've been thinking a lot about. At first, it kind of started thinking about double consciousness theory, but it kind of shifted a little bit to kind of examine ourselves. Whereas the phrase like "black is not a monolith," right, is a very common phrase to kind of like respect the differences in our shared and experiences that we have that are different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
However, we all collectively contribute to that monolith at the same time and build it up that monolith at the same time. And it results in trying to like live in both as an individual self, also as a representative of the quote unquote monolith, or like doing things for the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes those two things kind of they combat each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, what do you do when your own individual thoughts or beliefs or experiences are different than the collective monolith?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been thinking more about like showing these two versions of the same person. In a lot of, so that's why with the portrait of Malik and then the negative space there, I almost feel like the traditional portrait that you see is the presented self versus the negative space is like the real or the part that's free and it's gone, like it's carrying out outside of the piece. But like that's the part that we don't get to see, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still there too. And then like these two different versions of the same, you know, quilt, you know, the blue one and the red one of the same person that's in there. But trying to like show these two different versions of the same person to show like our perceived selves, how people look at us and how we're perceived by people versus how we think of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then how those two things kind of interact. And I think that's really more what I'm interested in compared to being like it's compared to like the more individual characteristics of myself or any other people.
So when did you start combining like for example your pen with watercolors? Because I'm assuming that the body is in, or at least here is pen, right? Or the
For which one,
no,
the quilt or the Malik piece?
sorry, the Malik piece.
So it's all pen. It's pen and glitter and fabric in the Malik piece. There's no watercolor in this one.
Really?
Um, yeah, this is all pen and glitter, and then the green down here. This is fabric. The
So
green
the
is fabric.
green, and what's the blue? What's the blue made of?
Yeah, so both of the green pieces at the bottom is fabric.
Wow,
Um,
that looks like
but the
watercolor.
entire figure, the background, uh, is pen, and then the sleeve there is glitter. But I do use watercolor some, but I use the watercolor. It's like underpainting for the pen.
Mm-hmm.
So usually, you know, it's put down first, and then the pen would go on top of the watercolor. It's only really to support the color and boost the color up.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly when I use it.
Interesting. Dude, that looks like and I guess it's also from afar what the camera does to the fine lines, you know, because you can't see that from
Mm-hmm.
there.
But I've been learning how like to blend those lines a little bit more with pen. Like sometimes I choose to show the marks a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I want to like blend it a little bit. Um, and so like yeah, up close you can see it. You can see some of it a little bit more. Let me see if I can like
Oh, so
especially like down in
now
the
I see
legs
the
and things.
glitter.
Yeah, and then at the
It
top,
looks
that's the
like
glitter.
sequins. Oh, that's neat.
So
Nice.
and
Um,
this is my first time kind of working with glitter too.
really? Well, it works. Working.
It's well, it's a mess as well.
Yes, glitter don't give a damn about your environment. It's To me, it's like that unruly child or unruly pet. I'm just saying, they're like, Psh, this is my I'm just here for, a portion of the time. It's literally
Hmm.
hilarious. Um,
Yeah,
so how long have you had a studio at Pyramid Atlantic?
it's been what, 3 or 4 years, I think I've been here.
Okay.
And before that, my kitchen table was my studio.
I think we've all
So,
had that kitchen table experience.
hmm, and it kind of still is.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So how does Pyramid Atlantic, do they have like a paid studio, or do you have to, like, is there a curation of any sort?
so yeah, I have a lease,
Ah,
here, and I'm
okay.
paying a lease here. There is also, with the lease, you still have to apply, like, to get in as well, like to get a studio.
Ah, that's what
But
I'm
they,
saying. Yes.
yeah, but then they also have, because the first floor is, Pyramid Atlantic is primarily a printmaking
Right,
studio,
right.
which I still need to do myself. I haven't done any printmaking since I've been here, but I need to.
Yeah, you
But
should.
they have programs and things for people who are not studio artists to also come and work here, and do work here as well.
Wow. For some reason, I guess because you said, because I know of Pyramid Atlantic, I assumed that you had done like some type of residency there.
I haven't, and I may apply for one to do, because I think this summer I may want to do some lithography. I've always wanted to do some stone lithography. I've never, learned, but it's something I've always wanted to do. And so they have classes and they have residencies and opportunities to do it here. But I feel like, especially with my work, it's like I know I got other things I gotta make. And so I always push like the printmaking like to the side.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so like it's not gonna happen until I like say I'm doing it now. And
Okay.
so I need to just say I'm gonna take 2 weeks or whatever to learn how to do it and make some prints.
You should, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making me want to take some classes there.
Like I've done prints, like in grad school actually. I had this series, it was 9 stretched quilts, like they were stretched like on stretcher bars
Mhm.
with wood cuts. I made a wood cut and printed it on top of the quilts. And it was 9 of them there. I actually have one over
Oh,
here
so you
in my studio.
you put then the ink, or and then actually put them on the quilts?
Yeah, and then stretched them like paintings.
No,
I got one of them over
I'd
here in
love
the
to see
corner.
it.
So this is 2012 now. So this is older. This is grad school work, but this is one of them here.
Interesting. Oh,
But
your
this was
palette was like totally different.
yeah. And so like this is all a woodcut. It's printed on top of the quilt, and then it's like kind of just stretched it. And there's batting in here as well, so it has like the softness of it, too. So I've done like relief work
Wow. I love to
before.
see all this fabric work. So you are a cousin. Here I
I
was
guess
thinking you
so.
were you are a cousin. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So like again, quilt making has always been there. It just comes through different ways. It's
Yeah.
expressed different ways.
Oh, I love it. So beyond, I heard you with the lithograph and in relationship to printing. What do you think, what else do you want to do to test and I'm assuming because of like the mediums and the shifting and how you're layering, and your execution of how you express your ideas it gradually changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's evolving. So I'm assuming
Mm-hmm.
you also want to continue to push yourself. Like sometimes
Yes.
sometimes I it's really interesting. Sometimes I can tell like when innovation or experimentation is a driver or very like influencing an artist's path,
Mm-hmm.
um, because you can see it. You can see it in the progression of the work. And to
Yeah.
me, that's when I'm like, yo, yeah, show me that. And like, let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
that. To me, that's one of the most, I don't know, exhilarating things about what we do. right? So all that. What is there something that you've been like, contemplating, like I'm thinking about it
Yeah.
beyond lithograph? And if you don't mind, like, would you share?
Yeah. Like, so for example, like the two, quilts behind me, like I said, they were really more like sketches. Like they're finished pieces, but they were really more like, how can I combine drawing with quilts together a little bit more?
Yeah.
For ideas that I want to do in the future. One thing I know I want to do, I'm tired of like the square or the rectangle.
I was gonna push you. That was gonna be my
Yeah.
next question.
Yeah. So like like there's a few things I look at a lot now is negative space, which is like the piece with
Yeah.
Malik, and then using fabrics that are more transparent that you can see through. So like I have some pieces that I want to do, like I have some old stretcher bars here that I want to actually stretch some pieces on stretcher bars, but having some of the fabrics transparent so you can see some of the stretcher bars, but also have some things go outside of that and off of that to start to break the relationship to the stretcher bar or break the relationship to painting, and to get to some organic shaped pieces, things that aren't just traditionally shaped, like a quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the two pieces here, like some part of it, what I kind of don't, or not to say don't like about it, what I want to like change is the idea of like it being just a piece of paper stitched on top of the quilt. It didn't feel like it's interwoven enough for me
Mm-hmm.
yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want them to be one and the same instead of it being almost like a frame for the drawing, if that makes sense.
I do.
Uh
I do get that. Yeah. I'm
yeah.
actually trying to figure that out for a piece because I got a solo coming up at Hillier in May.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it will be like semi biographical. So I'm like trying to figure out how do I get an image of myself into a plane, and then I'm going to have another artist draw me in another form to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, how do I get all that on fabric?
Yeah.
So I absolutely know
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought about sewing, like at least like to like that inch of sewing border that I saw you have, but I don't,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of work. I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe we can shoot ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
How to push that one because I'm definitely working through that myself.
Yeah. I think what I've been thinking about, like as I look at different quilt patterns,
Mm-hmm.
substituting certain fabric, like a part that would be a piece of fabric in a pattern, then that'd be like a part of a drawing. So let's say if it's like a strip quilt or something like that, like a simple strip quilt, where
Mm-hmm.
some of the strips are fabric, some of the strips are drawn parts that I draw, and having it a little bit more interwoven. But also, I have pieces where I'm gonna grab another piece from my studio wall here, where the fabric is on top of the drawing, and you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
through the fabric to see the drawing. So instead of the drawing always be on top, having the fabric on top,
Bring it
kind
on.
of
Let's
yeah.
see.
Uh, so this is like this is going to be a part of a larger piece here. But there's like a piece of fabric on top here, and like with these kind of transparent pieces, with
Yeah.
these like embroidered flowers that's on there. Like this is going to be part of a much larger piece I think I'm gonna make of
What
these collection of heads. What's that?
what material is it? What material is over the actual
What is
paper?
this called? It's not, what's it called? Tulle? Is that what it's called? And it's
Oh.
just embroidered, like embroidered tulle, I think is what it's called. Like
So you know how
yeah.
you see yourself moving before you actually move sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
My hands want to be like, let me touch.
Yeah.
Oh, neat.
So, and there's been pieces I've
What is
made in
the
the
actual
past.
what is the actual
Yeah.
drawing? Is that a like
So,
a torso?
oh yeah, so it's the back of a head. So you can see the ear
Oh,
here.
now I see
And so
it.
it's the waves in
Oh,
here.
wow.
And so actually the goal for what I want to do, I actually want to make at least like 9 or 10 of these, as I talk about the idea of the monolith, where you're just seeing the back of heads, male and female, but all of them have the kind of waves in their hair. So
Mm-hmm.
finger waves or like, Caesar cut waves or things like that. So it's
Mhm.
like this thing that kind of connects all of them together, and they all kind of combine together to create the monolith, but
Mhm.
they all are their individual cells at the same time too. So, and thinking about like this is like a piece in the quilt as I create other ones to go into the quilt as well. So
Mhm.
this is just like the number one, the first one. So I got to make a lot more of them to combine them to make the quilt of them together. So
Interesting. So,
yeah,
eventually, are you gonna, for some reason, I thought those were bees. Consider using bees.
I've been thinking about like other things to use outside of just fabric,
Oh, no, no,
embroidery thread.
I don't mean beads. I'm sorry. I thought the flowers were bees.
Oh, or bees.
They're
Yeah.
bees. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Um, so do you have anything, what else is coming up for you? And like for people that don't already know you, because we're
Hmm.
bordering our time. I don't want to hold you up
Hmm.
too much longer, but tell me about anything that's coming up.
Yeah. So I actually got some news this week, and I'm kind of don't even want to say
Oh,
it yet.
you don't have to share it if you're not
I'll say like it's for a show next year. It's
Okay.
not until next year.
Okay.
And so basically my focus is on that.
Okay.
I
Exciting.
think my
In this
2023
area
will
or
be
somewhere else?
it's in the South.
Ah,
Um
okay.
yeah, so this will be my first time showing here, showing there. It's at a university and it's a solo show somewhere. And so I'm work like now my whole focus is that show. So the like none of these pieces here behind me are going to be part of anything, but they're kind of starting ideas for some of the things I want to do to kind of talk about like what I mentioned before about the monolith and how
Mm-hmm.
we contribute and stand apart from the monolith
Mm-hmm.
um at all times, and how we have to deal with being apart in both of those constructs at all times,
Mm-hmm.
how that can tear us apart sometimes.
Mm.
So that's kind of what I'm kind of focusing on now.
So I got one other question for you. What other thing, how do you beyond materiality, what else informs your work?
Well, a lot of it is color driven. Like a lot of it is one feeling and emotion. Like there's been like this conversation has been really great because this idea of like thinking about the monolith,
Mm-hmm.
these shared experiences. How do you know that if you're not talking to anybody about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so like the reason why I did this portrait of Malik is because I invited him into the studio and we had a conversation. We talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
and we exchanged ideas. And I wanted to respect that and honor that with a piece, with him, and making a piece with that. And
Mm-hmm.
so like this conversation as well is helping doing that too. And so a lot of those experiences, again, those shared experiences that we have, that's what's informing a lot of what I want to talk about. And it's also the discourse that I'm trying to get away from that's we're surrounded by with like social media and other things. And I go back to this moment in time, which for most people it's like you think about it and it happened, but it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like a big event like certain things that happen in the world. But what I'm thinking about is like the Will Smith slap at the Oscars,
Mm-hmm.
the Chris Rock Will Smith slap.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I think about that so much, it became this moment of discourse in terms of how that slap affects black people, like black people all over. And I'm like, I didn't have anything to do with that, but it still affects me at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And like the things about like racism and other things, like I'm used to that. Like that's expected in a way, which is sad to say, but it's
Yeah.
like that slap was the thing that was like a catalyst for me in terms of all the thought pieces and discourse about like how that affects black men all over, or et cetera. It's so interesting to me. So trying to combat and battle that discourse, also knowing that I also contribute to it at the same time. That's what I think about a lot.
Okay, so you can't bring that up and not tell us like what you thought of it. So what did you extract from it?
I mean, it happened. it, you know, obviously it probably shouldn't have happened, but I feel like move on, basically. Like the idea of like, yes, it was bad, and it does, especially for people who their experiences with people of color may be limited. When they see that, it may color their mind about people of colors in a certain way, and I understand that. But how little old me, who is not at the Oscars, or don't know the people that's there, how does their experience also inform or shape my daily life as well? And then it becomes to the point, and I don't even think about it more so from an outside perspective of people looking at people of color, but more so how we talk about it with each other. How does Black people talk about it with each other, and how does that affect when people say, "Oh, Chris Rock should have done this. He should have responded with this. He's not a man because he didn't do this, or he is a man because he held restraint and didn't react to it." There's a lot of like opinions about what people should have done or not have done, or like silly things like, and this is just a different example, but very silly example of like, should men drink lemonade, stuff like that. Like it's a lot of like very silly, childish discourse that kind of also informs a lot of this too, in terms of the constructs.
And drink lemonade. Lemonade is just lemonade.
Right, but it's this idea of like, if you're a man or if you're Black, it's weak to do these things, eat vegetables, or like to do it, and it's like a discourse that I see driving it.
What the hell?
And I'm naming some purposely silly kind of examples. They're purposely kind of absurd. But there's a certain discourse about like, whatever label or construct you fit into, what is your role to fit into that construct, and how other people can have an opinion about that. And I'm primarily within our own communities, not even looking at the outside communities, like just within our own. And I think that's something I'm starting to like think about a little bit more. And that's why I kind of talk about like our perceived selves versus our actual selves, and the two different versions of ourselves that I'm starting to think about a lot more now. So
that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a lot. So that's interesting. Okay. So tell people like how to and where to find your work.
yeah. So obviously I'm representing my Morton Fine Art. You can go to Amy's website, mortonfineart.com. I have some things available there if you're looking to purchase anything. Also on Artsy. My website, michael-booker.com, and Instagram, MABooker_art. That's my main places where you can see my work.
All right, hold on.